If you've been attending one of our churches or this church for years or months or weeks, or maybe it's just your first time, I want to tell you for the next few minutes what I want for you. And you may not care what I want for you because you don't really know who I am, and I get that. But I just had this Sunday to just tell you what I really, really want for you. And here's what I want for you. Regardless if you're a person of faith or not, or you've been a Christian for a long time, I want you to have an unmistakable, in the sense that nobody is mistaken, an unmistakable, unshakable faith in God that's not just internal, but that ultimately informs every single one of your decisions in every season of your life. And when I say an unmistakable, unshakable faith in God, I'm talking about God as Jesus revealed God. You remember at the end of his life, he said to his disciples, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So if you stop short of Jesus, you stop short of knowing what God's like. If you move past Jesus, you've moved past what God is like. And I just want all of you and all of us and your kids and your grandkids, if you have kids, and your future spouse, if you're looking for a spouse, to just have this unmistakable, unshakable faith in God as Jesus has revealed God to us. And I want it to inform all of your decisions. Or the short version of that is I want you to have a really big and a really active faith, a big, mature, and we're going to talk a little bit in a minute, informed faith in God that actually moves you to follow Jesus. Now, here's something really interesting, and I've shared this before, so this may be repeat, but that's okay. This is so amazing to me. Did you know there are only 2 occasions in the life of Jesus, the recorded life of Jesus, and we have 4 accounts of the life of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There are only 2 occasions in all 4 of those accounts of Jesus where Jesus was amazed by something. Wouldn't it be cool if you were one of the few people who amazed Jesus? Like, that's amazing. Like, Jesus thinks I'm amazing. I mean, wouldn't that be amazing? There's only 2 occasions in the Gospels where Jesus was amazed by anything, and both times were related to people's faith. The first time, he just finished his famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, comes down off the mountain. A man with leprosy walks up to Jesus, asks for healing. Jesus heals the leper, which is in the crowd, goes wild, you know. And there was a Roman centurion in the crowd and saw this and had heard Jesus teach. And he walks up to Jesus and he says, Jesus, hey, I have a servant at home and he's dying. Would you heal my servant? You know, people there's a hush over the crowd. Is he going to help a Roman centurion? Is he going to help what is generally, considered an enemy of the citizens of Galilee, because Jesus is way up north of the Sea of Galilee at the time? And Jesus says, I will heal your servant. I'll follow you home and heal your servant. And you maybe remember this story. The centurion says to Jesus, he says, no, you don't need to come home with me. I know how this works, and I've been watching you, and I know how you work. He says, and the reason I know how this works is because of what I do as a Roman centurion. For I myself, or I too, like you, one translation says, which is a little more accurate, like you, I too am a man under authority with soldiers under me. And he says to Jesus, he says, so when I tell my soldiers to go that way, they go that way. When I say go that way, they go that way. If I send them into battle, they go into battle. If I send them to get me lunch, they go get me lunch. And the reason they do what I tell them to do is not me. The reason they do what I tell them to do is because of who I represent. I represent the Roman Empire. If I was not a Roman centurion, they wouldn't give me any attention, but because of who I represent, they do what I order them to do. And then he looks at Jesus and he essentially says, look, I've been watching you clearly. You're like me. You represent something or someone bigger than you do. So you don't need to come to my house. You just do what I do. If you just give the command, I believe my servant will be healed. This is so cool. And when Jesus heard this, here it is, he was amazed. He was astonished. He was impressed. But what was he impressed by? Well, the text tells us. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed, and he said to those following him, truly, I tell you, I've not found anyone in Israel. I've not even found a son or daughter of Abraham. I've not found anybody in Israel with such great faith, big, informed, active faith, and the servant was healed. Now, here's the fun fact, and this kind of levels the playing field for all of us. Jesus was never amazed at anyone's knowledge. You are so smart, he never said, right? Okay, because he's Jesus, he's the Son of God. He was never amazed at how smart people were or how insightful people were. He was only amazed by how much faith they had, or in the second incident, how little faith they had. So the second time Jesus is amazed, he's visiting in the hometown of Nazareth. Maybe you've experienced this. So he goes home, and when he gets there, he's sort of becoming a famous person. He's not super famous yet. This is still at the beginning of his ministry. So he comes home to Nazareth, and the people were so impressed, oh, Jesus, we've heard all these amazing stories. And then there's a little bit of jealousy that sets in, right? It's like, wait a minute. But no, before we get too excited, isn't this is so real, so gritty, so earthy. Isn't this the carpenter? Let's not lose our minds over this guy. We know who he is. Isn't this Mary's son? Mary, come over here. Isn't this your son? I mean, we knew him since he was a little boy running around. He was a teenager. And besides that, his brother James is here, and Joseph and Judas and Simon. He's just one of us. These are Jesus' brothers. And get this, some of you didn't know this. And aren't his sisters here with us? Jesus had sisters. So Jesus had a large family there in Nazareth. And remember, he didn't leave, when he was 16 and he came back 30 famous. He lived there for 30 years. So they'd seen him in every single season of life and every stage of life. Then he disappears and comes back and he's gaining all this notoriety. And they're like, he's not all that special. Let's not lose our minds over this guy. He's just one of us, but now he thinks he's better than the rest of us. And Jesus responds, he was amazed at their lack of faith. So there you have it. The two things that amazed Jesus. He was amazed by great faith. There was great faith, and he was amazed by a lack of faith. He was amazed by big faith, big, bold, active faith, and he was amazed at small faith. Now, this is not complicated. I would guess that all of you and all of us know at least one person or maybe several people who have what we would consider big faith. Big faith, we would say they have big faith because they are able and they're willing and they have decided in their lives to evaluate all of life and to react to all of life through the focus and the lens of God's faithfulness. That they believe in a big God who has the whole world in his hands and things don't always go their way. In fact, things rarely go their way. But somehow in spite of that, they maintain their faith in God. Their confidence in God actually informs all of their actions. But most importantly and most difficult, you've seen these people. Their faith actually impacts their reactions. And that's what Jesus wanted for his first century followers. And that's what he wants for his 21st century followers as well. Big faith, big active faith, because big faith is active faith. It makes a difference in the world. It makes a difference in your relationships. It makes a difference when you're dating. It makes a difference when you're married. It makes a difference where you work. It makes a difference when you're out of work. And so just like he wanted big, active faith, bold faith for his first century followers, he wants that for all of us as well, and he wants that for all of you as well. Because big, active faith does things that it makes lives better and it makes the world a better place. So all that sort of set up. So almost 30 years ago, 29 years ago, when we started this church that became a whole bunch of churches, we wanted to create an organization, or we wanted to create a church that was hyper-focused on helping people become big faith people. We didn't want to just have a church. Atlanta had plenty of churches. There are plenty of churches in the world. We wanted to be super specific about what we were trying to accomplish as a group of people. And we wanted to create the whole organization, the programming, the communication style, everything around helping people get real world practical faith. And we recognize, even in those early years, that there are 5 things that lead to big faith. That if you were to say to me, hey, Andy, my faith is deteriorating, what can I do? Or I want to have more faith, or I'm just brand new to faith, what should I do? Hey, I've been answering this really the same way for 35 years, but 30 years when we started the church, we just kind of focused in. There are 5 things that actually grow and mature a person's faith. We call them, if you've been around here, we call them the 5 faith catalysts. These are basically the 5 essential ingredients, if you can think of it as a recipe, the 5 essential ingredients for somebody to develop a growing, maturing, enduring faith in God. So every couple of years, we come back and talk about these 5 things. Sometimes we do a whole series around these 5 things. But today, I just want to show you the list or remind you of the list. I really wish all of us would commit these 5 things to memory, but that's a big ask. But I just want to show you the list. And then at the end of the message, I want to ask you to consider something. So if you want your faith to grow, here you go. Sandra's here today. I knew she would like that. If you want your faith to grow, here you go. These are the 5 faith catalysts. Okay, real quick. Number 1, practical teaching. One of the things that grows your faith is when you sit in a church like one of our churches, or a church maybe where you live, or the Bible study, where somebody opens the scripture and talks not just about what it says, but tells you what to do with what it says, a practical approach to faith. That grows your faith. We'll come back to that in a minute. The second one is personal ministry. Anytime you step out of your comfort zone to do something you think God wants you to do, your faith grows, because it's like, God, if you don't come through, I'm through, because the first time you ever went on a mission trip and you were scared to death and you're like, I'm not a missionary. I don't even know what to wear, And then you kind of decided, I got my passport up to date, and you went wherever we asked you to do, or you served, or you sat in a carpet circle with children, or you did the ultimate, you decided, I'm gonna lead a small group of middle school boys. What am I doing? I hated middle school, and I don't even know what they're talking about. And what happens when you step into an environment of personal ministry, or you just feel like you need to talk to one of your neighbors about Jesus, or invite a friend to church, it's like God, please, please, please help them to just not be there when I call. It's like it just does something for your faith. The third one, private disciplines, or you could call these the private spiritual disciplines. We want to keep it simple. The private disciplines. One of the things that grows our faith is when we begin reading the scripture on our own for the first time, or we get a devotional book, we begin to pray for the first time, carve out time in the morning or in the afternoon. When you begin to be a percentage giver or a tither, you're like, hey, here's a percentage of my income. I'm dedicating this to what God's doing in the world, and you give it up front. That's a discipline, a spiritual discipline. Corporate worship, deciding, I'm going to gather with other believers for corporate worship. All of those are spiritual disciplines. They are small deposits over time that make all the difference in the world, because that's the nature of a discipline. A discipline is a small deposit over time. This is a small deposit over time that renews your mind and builds your faith. Fourth one's providential relationships. Whenever a person tells their faith story, they always talk about, and then I met this guy, or then I met this family, or then this couple moved into our neighborhood, or then my parents introduced me to a friend. And there's always a somebody in the story that God uses, and when we look back on our lives, it's like, I just feel like God brought them into my life. That's a fourth thing that always builds our faith. And the last one is pivotal circumstances. Pivotal circumstances. Circumstances that God uses to get our attention to begin with, or circumstances God uses in order to help us rekindle or reignite our faith or capture our attention, because after all, we're fine without God until we're not. In fact, maybe you're here today, or maybe you're at one of our churches today, or you're watching today because of a pivotal circumstance. You were fine, and then you weren't. You had it all figured out, and then you didn't. And now it's like, God, I don't know who you are. I don't even know how to pray, but if you're up there out there somewhere, I need something, because I am not enough for what I'm facing today. God uses pivotal circumstances to grow our faith. Now, here's the challenge. Our church, our organization, this organization, or the organization you're a part of at your local church, even if it's not one of our churches, the local church can only do so much, right? We can only do so much when you think about this list. You know this, you have a part to play in developing your faith. I mean, we can keep delivering practical teaching, but you've got to be here for it, or you got to be online to receive it. We can provide opportunities for you to serve personal ministry, but you've got to engage in those opportunities, or go on that mission trip, or talk to your neighbor. And fortunately, at our churches, thousands of you have stepped up to be involved in personal ministry, and it's why so many great things are happening in the next generation in our church. We appreciate that. But as it relates to these three, there's really not much I can do. There's certainly not much I can do from here, right? I mean, when it comes to private disciplines, about every fourth or fifth sermon, you'll hear me say, you should read your Bible, you should read your Bible. But that doesn't create a habit for you. You should pray. That doesn't create a habit for you. We can suggest tools. Every once in a while, you can text, and we'll text you back and give you devotional thoughts, during a series. But again, we can't develop that spiritual discipline habit for you, right? And in terms of providential relationships, I can't create a relationship for you. I certainly can't, create a providential relationship for you where you look back and it's like, wow, I'm just so glad that person or those people came into my life. And pivotal circumstances, you don't want us to create one of those for you, right? I send somebody by your house while you're at church to throw a brick through your window, and you get home after church and it looks like somebody's broken into your house, and you feel fear, and because you feel fear, you pray, and because you pray, your faith gets bigger, and then it all works out. You don't need any help with pivotal circumstances, right? They come rolling in without any outside help. In fact, Jesus said, here's a promise, whether you're a Christian or a religious person or not. Here's something Jesus said that you know is true. He said, in this world, you will have trouble. It's like, wow, that came true. Yes, absolutely. And Jesus did not say, follow me and you won't have any trouble. He said, follow me and you will stay out of trouble, but follow me and there won't be any trouble. He did not say. He said, just the way the world is, just wait a minute because it's coming for you. So the point of all that is this: these three, which are so critical to your faith. These three which are so critical to your faith. In fact, find me a person who has lost faith. I'll show you someone, and I'm not being critical of you if this is you. This is just the nature of things. I'll find you somebody who's drifted away from these three things and got wrecked by this one. We'll come back to that in just a minute. But the point is, these three are best facilitated, experienced, encouraged, and monitored, not in rows, but in a circle. In a small group with men and women or individuals in your season of life that are facing some of the same life challenges, who are trying to figure out, how does this faith thing intersect with my real world? And so that's why we staff for and budget for and urge you constantly to join a small group. You being in a small group in a home does not benefit the church corporately. In fact, we spend money to help facilitate small groups. There is no win for us corporately. This is for you, but we're committed to this because for 30 years, we've been committed to help raising up men and women who have really big, active, bold faith in God. And we want you in a circle with people who are in your season of life, wrestling with the same life issues, relationship issues, financial issues, parenting issues, maybe aging parenting issues, marriage, career, whatever it might be. And here's the thing. If you have decided to follow Jesus with your life, then every single one of those areas of life intersects with the teaching of Jesus. There's something about following Jesus as a parent, as a husband, a wife, as a grandparent, as an employee, as an employer, as a neighbor, as a friend. Following Jesus intersects all of those things. And again, you're never gonna hear me cover all the eventualities and all the details of your life to answer your questions. No preacher's that good. There's just not enough time. We're too diverse in terms of our seasons of life, and that's okay. That kind of conversation doesn't happen in rows. It happens in circles, but because it's not always obvious how to follow Jesus, and it's not always obvious what to do. We all, me included, maybe me more than you, we all need a safe place to process out loud, to share our doubts in a safe place, to ask our questions and not just get a Bible verse or some pithy answer, but to really drill down on your difficult questions because you're smart and you have good questions. You have big faith questions. We all need a place to ultimately tell our stories. If you have never had the opportunity or the experience of sitting down in a circle and somebody saying, tell us your story, you're missing out on one of the greatest joys in life. Not just because you enjoy talking about yourself, but because when you tell your story to a group of new friends, something happens in those relationships instantly. I'm telling you, instantly. And we all need a place where people pray for us and where we get to pray for other people. Let me just ask you this real quick. Don't answer out loud. When is the last time, maybe never, you heard somebody pray for you out loud? And if you're like, oh, all the time, well, let me flip it around. Did you know there are people that maybe you're in a small group with now, or maybe you'll eventually be in a small group with, who have never in their entire lives, I know this from personal experience, lots of personal experience. There are people who have never heard someone pray for them by name out loud. And it is a powerful, powerful experience. And that's not gonna happen. And here on Sundays, what do? We dish out information, and we got great music. We dish out inspiration. I dish out general application. But group life is where those concepts and those insights collide with real life, where they collide with your life. That's where it actually gets real. That's where it gets personal. And most importantly, group is where we become accountable, because we're gonna see those same people week after week after week after week, and we're gonna be able to follow up with them and they follow up with us. We're gonna become accountable to do. We're gonna become accountable to change, to try, to start. And here's the thing, and I say this to you all the time. It is doing that makes the difference. It's not believing. When our faith becomes action, things change. As long as our faith is just faith, nothing changes. This is why, if you do what I do, you hear all the stories, and there's about 5 stories. I'll just be honest, okay? And people start talking, I'm like, oh yeah, that's this one. But that's okay. I'm not gonna interrupt you. But your experience is unique to you, but I hate to burst your bubble. You're not all that unique, and I'm not all that unique. There's about 5 stories, okay? And so when people begin to tell their story, it becomes evident. But here's the point. Look up here if you've lost interest. Back with me, okay? I understand. It's like, I wonder how many of those things they have. Okay, just back up here a second. Put your phone down at home. Put your phone down. Just give me your attention for just a second. Okay, look up here. This is what I want for you. This is so what I want for you. When your obedience to God, in other words, you feel like there's something I need to do or I need to do different. I need to get out of that relationship. I've known for a long time I need to get out of that relationship. I need to get out of that relationship. I need to recommit to this relationship. I've known for a long time I need to recommit to this relationship. I need to get out of this city because this city's killing me and all my friends are the wrong kinds of friends and I'm the wrong kind of friend to them. I got a new, whatever it is. I need to be more generous, or I need to have a budget, or I need to break a habit, whatever your thing is. Listen. When your obedience to God, like I'm gonna do this, God, and I'm trusting you, when your obedience intersects with God's faithfulness, or the way I say it sometimes is when your faith, your active faith, intersects with God's faithfulness, this is where change happens. This is where you grow. This is where you mature. This is where God becomes real in your life. It's not in your head. It is in your obedience to God. This is why throughout the Gospels, Jesus invited his disciples to do the craziest things, and he had to hurry. He only had 3 years. It was a crash course. Get in the boat. We're going to have a storm. You're going to think you're going to drown. I'm going to save you. We got to get this thing going. I only got 3 years, okay? So there was a crash course on trust me, trust me, trust me, trust me. God is big enough to care for you. But in your life and in my life, I'm telling you, when you take those baby steps, those initial steps of, okay, I'm gonna try this, I'm gonna do this, and when your faith, if you've been on a mission trip, you get this. It's like, okay, I'm gonna go. And during that trip, you saw God work and you come back and you are changed. When your faith intersects with God's faithfulness, change happens, your faith gets bigger. And here's the thing, you will be far more likely to follow through and to do with people of faith surrounding you. You just will. I can't do that for you. As soon as I'm finished, you're out, it's lunchtime, or you turn off and you're gonna watch something else, and it's out of sight, out of mind. When you are surrounded by people of faith, you are far more likely to follow through and to do, and doing is what makes the difference in your life, and doing is what makes the difference in your faith. And group life ensures that we're not just hearers, but doers. If you grew up in church, you're familiar with this statement James, the brother of Jesus, made. I just always think it's amazing that we have a first century document written by the brother of Jesus. In fact, James was just mentioned in that passage I showed you a while ago. James became a famous Jesus follower after Jesus rose from the dead. Before Jesus rose from the dead, it's just my crazy brother. Jesus rises from the dead, it's like, and he's my Lord. Okay, so that's what happens when somebody rises from the dead. All the categories change. And James wrote this document, and in it, he says the most interesting thing. You're familiar with this. He says to all of us, he says to, religious people everywhere, and Christians in particular, don't merely be a hearer. He says, don't merely listen to the preacher. Don't merely listen to the podcast. Don't merely listen to the word and so deceive yourself. To which you're like, wait a minute. I thought I got credit for listening. I mean, some of you, come on. The only reason you go to Mass, the only reason you go to church, it's like, did you see, God, you saw me, like you saw, so like I'm on your good side. And James is going, are you kidding? You're deceiving yourselves. That doesn't do you any good. But I attended and I watched online. James, the brother of Jesus, says, if you think that's helpful, if you think that's all there is, that somehow God's going, bless that dude. He went, and in fact, he stayed extra 10 minutes talking to people, so we're keeping his, he's like, you're deceiving yourself. James says, I'm not buying it. And your heavenly Father's not buying it. He loves you too much to buy it. Don't merely listen to the word and so deceive yourself. Do what it says. Why? Because doing is what makes the difference. It doesn't get you into heaven. It makes your life a little bit more heavenly because you've invited the faithfulness of God into your marriage and your parenting and every other area of your life. And then he gives the most extraordinary illustration in all of the New Testament, one of the greatest illustrations ever, certainly among ancient writers. He says, look, listening and not doing anything, he says, you know what that's like, adults? It's like getting up in the morning, walking in the bathroom, looking in the mirror and going, ugh, and then going to work or going to school and not doing anything about what you see, to which we would say, I would never do that. And he's like, well, that's what you're doing in your relationship with God. You're listening to the preacher going, wow, that's convicting, and I'm not gonna do anything about it. He said, and I would add, that there is a group of people who get up in the morning and glance in the mirror and don't do anything about it. We call them children. And James is saying, don't be a children. Don't be immature. Don't do in the most important arena of your life what you would never do physically. And why don't we do that physically? Because other people see us. To which James is going, aha. Did you know that other people see what you do, not just what you look at and they look like, and they see how you react to life, not just what you do in life. So don't be a children, don't be immature. So anyway, back to our list. These three things I can't do for you. The church can't do for you. You have to do for you. We will put the ball on the tee. We will give you opportunities. We're gonna give you tools. But if your faith is gonna grow, you've gotta engage. And these three things are best experienced, monitored, and facilitated in a circle, not in a row, in a small group. And here's what happens. These somewhat, I'll call them engineered relationships, because you're gonna sign up for a small group or show up for a small group for the first time. You're not gonna know anybody. You're gonna go, this is so fabricated. This is so engineered. Okay, you can argue over lunch what I'm about to say, but listen. Most of, if not all of your relationships are engineered. You didn't choose to be born. You didn't choose to be born to your family. Engineered, right? And from there on, same thing. The reason you love your neighbors is because you live in that neighborhood. And before you love those neighbors, you move there. Engineered. You don't feel close to my neighbors. You don't live in my neighborhood. I don't even know who your neighbors are. And you're like the greatest people in the world. I don't know them. Why? Not because they're not great people. The reason you love that guy at work, those people at work, is because you got the job there and they got the job. Almost all of our relationships are engineered by outside circumstances. Small group is no different. But your best friends, you know, so is my best friend, where did you meet? And you're gonna answer a question where you met. It had nothing to do with the relationship. It had everything to do with, well, that's where I got into college, or that's the school I chose, or we lived in that county, so I went to that high school. They're all engineers, so you gotta get over that. Guys, you gotta get over that, okay? It does feel a little bit artificial. That's okay. You are accustomed to that. My first date with Sandra, I didn't even know who I was going out with. I didn't know what she looked like. I didn't know anything about her, but a friend of mine engineered, and I mean, it's a long story. He engineered it like, you are going out with her. And I'm so glad he engineered what became my most amazing, wonderful relationship. So I thought Sandra would clap. She didn't clap, but anyway, it's okay. She was clapping in her heart. I know she was clapping in her heart. Okay, I'm clapping in my heart, honey, too. Anyway, so here's my point. Look back up here. These somewhat engineered relationships, look up here, often become providential relationships and catalytic relationships and long-term relationships. These engineered relationships are gonna show up in a small group will be the people that God uses to grow up and blow up your faith. And we hear it all the time. I don't know where I would be without my small group. I don't know what we would have done without our small group. Suddenly these relationships become so personal and so important to people. So as it relates to pivotal circumstances, I want to come back to this in just a minute. This is so important, then we're done. This one right here. As you know, disruptive, big, generally bad events either strengthen or destroy a person's faith. I've been doing this a long time as a pastor. What makes the difference is not the event. Just like you have illustrations too. I've met families or individuals who went through similar experiences, and one lost their faith and one actually found their faith, or their faith got strengthened. It's not the event. Do you know what makes the difference? Here's what makes the difference, 3 things. What we believe when those events happen, who we listen to, and how we frame it. That's what determines whether or not a big negative event either wrecks your faith or builds your faith. People who lose faith because of really, really difficult, bad circumstances usually lose it. They usually have some sort of fault or flaw in their faith, and it's not their fault. They either didn't grow up in a community of faith, or they went to a church where their faith wasn't allowed to grow up. This is why I say this all the time. A faith that never grows up can't bear up under the rigors of adulthood. If your faith isn't allowed to grow up, it's just not gonna bear up. So oftentimes people's faith falls apart during difficult circumstances because there was a fault, there was a problem with their faith. And without a faith community, not this, without a circle, without those kinds of relationships, and without a place to ask our questions and to grieve and to complain and to doubt out loud, our faith is going to suffer. And what makes all the difference is who we listen to during those seasons and during those moments, and how our tragedy or how that bump in our life gets framed. How we frame life events, I'm telling you, makes all the difference in the world. And reframing or properly framing a difficult life event is one of the most important roles that a small group plays. And here's the thing. If you have a circle when it happens, you are so blessed. And if you don't, you don't. And it's too late in that moment to get that, because these are relationships, and we want you to be ready. How we frame those experiences makes all the difference. And again, this is one of the roles that groups play. You are far more, then we're almost done, I promise. You are far more likely to make it through with people of faith surrounding you. And we all need people who can help us find God in the storms. Here's what I've learned personally. Here's what I've seen multiple times. If we, and some of you are right in this right now, maybe this is for you. If we can find God in it, we are far more likely to maintain faith through it. If you can find God in it, you are far more likely to maintain faith through it. This is why it's so amazing. When the disciples are in this boat, they're fishermen. They've lived their lives, most of them, on this lake. This is not new experience. When they think the boat's gonna sink and they think they're gonna drown, Jesus is in the boat with them, asleep, to make his point. When you can find God in it, you are more than likely, you're gonna be able to make it through it, and you need people to help you do that. So back to where we started. Here's what I want for you. Unmistakable, unshakable faith in God that informs all of your decisions. And to get that, you need more than sermons, and I like sermons. I spend a lot of time coming up with these sermons, but I'm telling you, I'm admitting, sermons aren't enough, and I love our music, songs are not enough. You need a circle. You need conversations about what it looks like to follow Jesus in your world, in your unique circumstances, with your unique family dynamics, with your unique challenges, your unique opportunities. And if you're hesitant, and if it still feels too artificial, and you're not sure it's gonna be very helpful, you're not alone. Tim felt the very same way. And here's a bit of he and Madeline's story. Check this out.
You do the intro.
No, I'm not introducing you. You gotta say your name. This is how we actually are. I am Tim. Hi, my name's Madeline.
And I'm Tim. That doesn't work.
Try this again. All right.
Hi, I'm Madeline.
Hi, I'm Tim Burns.
And we have been married for about 7 years now. We have 2, almost 3 beautiful kids. And we moved to Atlanta from Buffalo, New York about 5 years ago now. My biggest hesitation about moving to a new city far away from home was I really wanted to make sure that we found a sense of community here. So for me, like, my ultimatum was, we are finding a church we like, we are joining a small group.
I was very hesitant. I always had this idea of what, a church person would be, kind of like the Dana Carvey character from SNL, the church lady. For me, the hardest part about getting involved was fear. Going into a group of 10 to however many people and talking about one of the most probably vulnerable things in anyone's life. Faith is always a difficult topic. For me, as somebody who was struggling with faith originally, what was unexpected was how much I ended up enjoying it. I didn't know that it was something I was going to stick with long term. I was just mostly doing it as something to appease my wife. I remember walking out of there and looking over to Madeline and saying, oh, it's not that bad. It wasn't what I had originally built it up to be in my head. It's not that bad. Put that on a tagline, and I think we're good here.
Not that bad.
Yeah. Being in a small group, I think, gives you space to be able to ask those questions or be vulnerable. And it doesn't matter which walk of life you come from, what career path you have. We're there and we have that in common, and we can build off of that.
For me, the most unexpected thing has been, seeing Tim go from someone who I had to drag to that first group meeting.
Almost physically. That's almost not even a joke.
To years later now, he's a willing and great spiritual leader of his own group.
She said it.
Our group always meets on Sunday nights, so it's nice to go from being at a big church service where sometimes it can feel a little bit lonely and isolating to being in a group really does make the church feel smaller, and we see a lot of familiar faces when we walk through the bigger doors of the church in the morning.
Looking back and to be able to see where we've all grown from, newly marrieds who are just figuring it out in a big city to starting families and growing in our careers.
We've been able to walk through difficult times with, the same group of people, and I think just being able to reflect on all of it, I think as a whole has really strengthened my faith to just, there's not one big gotcha moment, but it's all the little things that add up over time.
I would say to somebody who's thinking about it, what do you have to lose? And you do certainly have everything to gain.
Being a Christian is not supposed to be isolating. It's supposed to all be about fellowship and community, and we really feel like we've been able to find it in our small group.
So, thank you. Yes, thank you for Tim. Yeah. So if you are like our group, we took a little break for the summer. So if you're already in a community group and you took a break for the summer, it's time to call everybody up, get your calendars coordinated. Don't let the fall slip by without re-engaging. That's easy to do. Every once in a while we hear, well, Andy, I was in a group once and I had a bad group experience. So let me just say, I had a really bad 8th grade experience. And my parents made me finish the 8th grade. So anyway, it's okay. You've had a bad haircut. You didn't give up on that. So let's just grow up a little bit. It's okay. Yeah, there's some bad group experiences, but you need a circle. We all need a circle. So give this another shot, or if it's your first time, give it a first shot. So here's how it works. In 2 weeks, we open group launch. We have, again, all kinds of groups, different nights of the week, different times of the day. And so we want you to know when we open group launch so you can get into group for you. So today, before the end day is out, I need you to text NP Groups to 51255. You text NP Groups to 51255. You're not signing up for anything. This is just gonna put you on a list. And in 2 weeks, when we open group launch, you're gonna get a text to say, by the way, group launch is open and here's the link. So you don't have to remember anything. You don't have to write anything down other than this. And let us give you an opportunity to at least see if group life is for you. That you don't sign a contract. You can quit. You can give a fake name if you feel like you need to do that, okay? But give this an opportunity. We don't think this is an add-on. We think this is absolutely mission critical, because I want you to have big, bold, enduring faith. And so does your Heavenly Father. So thanks for being here today. Real quick reminder, next week is the Perfect Come Sit With Me opportunity, and I told you I had a little bit of surprise, and I just found out about this today. If you bring a guest, if you're an adult and you bring a guest with you next Sunday, I don't know how we pulled this off, you get a free one of these. Now, it's not a Stanley, okay? I just gotta let you know. It's a little bit lighter, but you can still break a window and you can still carry it with you. So you get a free one of these if you bring a guest next week. Thanks for being here. Love you guys. See you next time. Take care.